Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin with the Modern Observer Group. And with me, as always, is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic.
Happy October.
Yes, we're heading now into fourth quarter, wrapping up the year.
Turning over new leaves.
Yep, raking them up.
Go.
And as we wrap up the year and we're heading into the fourth quarter, we want to talk about what people are doing. And looking at it, we're talking about starting your own business and getting into side hustles and really taking control of your career.
Yeah, it's exciting to be thinking about this too. And, obviously more and more people are going into business for themselves because you see the corporate downsizing and that kind of thing. Plus, with the internet, there's never been so many opportunities, and they're only just going to be going up and up and up. So it's the perfect time to be considering those things. And obviously, there's a lot of preparation work that you have to do for these things, but it's something that everybody should be looking into on the side, whether they're going to do it or not. And, if you are getting interested in doing this, obviously, if it's making money right off the bat, like you talked about Uber and Airbnbs, that's one thing. But if you're going to start doing your own thing, it's going to take a lot of planning as far as replacing what you're doing now over a period of time and that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And in fact, one of the best ways to do this is to start off your project on the side while you have your job and you're working both. And a study just came out from bankrate.com saying that 44 million people have a side job, whether it's something like Uber or Airbnb that they're doing on the side or starting their own business. 44 million people. 86% of them say they earn money every month. 36% of them started off making at least $500 extra a month. And why this is important is because you don't want to be spinning your wheels, in the rat race your whole life. And taking some advice from a very smart man, Warren Buffett, who I don't think anybody could dispute that he is successful. He said, you should never have only one source of income. So if you've got your job and you've got your business, you're already diversifying where your income is coming from. Because the fact of the matter is, the days of coming out of school, getting a job, and staying with that job until you retire are long gone. Today, the average person stays at a job for 3 years. And even that is starting to get shorter. Whether it's from downsizing or corporate buyouts or whatever it is, you need to be able to have another source of income to fall back on if you're going to stay in corporate. And if you're not going to stay in corporate, being employed is a great way to have an income while you're launching your business.
Yeah, and this drills back to the book that we talked about a few weeks ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, as far as building up and having things working for you. And this is a great way to get things going that way. So again, planning is really, really important. There's a whole lot of opportunities out there that you can research and get involved with, but putting something together and maybe a couple of different things, working towards a business that you're doing that really promotes your talents and the things that you like to do, as well as doing something like an Uber or something like that on the side to start putting some money in the bank for you. Whatever you're doing, it's really important to start planning things and making sure that you are allocating this extra money that you're making towards the right things, like paying yourself first, as Robert Kiyosaki says.
Yes. That is very important. were a lot of good lessons to be taken from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's certainly one of the most important, is to make sure that you are investing in yourself. And of course, that becomes a lot easier when you have multiple streams of income, because you can allocate your day job to paying your bills, your side hustle to paying you. And as you build up the business, little by little, you transfer those expenses over. And it's very important to not get locked in to one thing, especially when it's something you don't have control over. And let's face it, when you're working for someone else, you don't have control over your job. When you're the boss, that's when you can take control. But there's a lot more to it than just jumping in. I've often said, people, web designers start design firms because they want to design. But when you make that leap from employee to business owner, there's a lot more going on than just doing the day-to-day work. You've got to plan on how to set things up, whether you're going to do a sole proprietorship or a corporation or an LLC or a partnership. You have to keep...
And you have to make sure that you have the capacity to fulfill what you're doing also. I mean, we talk a lot about the book, The E-Myth, and you have to plan for that also. So, I mean, there's some cons to self-employment, with obviously the lack of security, you're losing your benefits and things like that. You do have to structure yourself legally. DBA is the simplest one, but if you're going to be forming an LLC or a corporation, you got to do that. You got to make sure you have your proper insurance. You got to make sure that you're reporting your income 1099 style, all those kind of things that you have to do. And, there are organizations that can help you do that. In Connecticut, we have, I think it's CERC or something like that, where you can look all these things up. But if you're actually starting a business for yourself, it's really, really important to be organized up front. But talking about the positives the bottom line is, if you're working for yourself, now you got time to fit in your family life, your vacations and things like that. You're totally in charge as far as accountability to clients and things like that. You don't have to worry about people looking over your shoulder. Normally, if you're working out of your home, you're probably cutting down on your travel and that kind of thing. So there's a whole lot of different positive things about self-employment. One thing to watch out for, though, is to make sure once you start that you get yourself on a schedule and don't kind of procrastinate and lag and so on and so forth, because that's potential con, is getting too comfortable at home.
Absolutely. You take for granted when you're working for someone else that you have a set schedule. You're at work by 9, you can leave by 5, you take your lunch hour, your schedule is pretty well set for you. When you're starting your own business or doing a side hustle, you have to set that schedule. And honestly, most days I follow the same schedule now that I did when I was in corporate. By 9 a.m., I am in my office. Roughly 5 o'clock, I'll head home to spend time with the family. Or, just as likely, I'll head out to meetings. You have that flexibility. And I tend to work what I refer to as the Don Draper method. For those of you who've watched Mad Men, Don Draper used to work on average 12 hours a day, but he didn't work those 12 hours in a row. He'd sometimes start early in the morning, he'd take a break in the middle of the day, he'd be working late into the night. He could move his schedule around, but he always got those 12 hours or so in, regardless of how he got them in. And when you're your own boss, the hours do tend to spread out, starting with 7:30 breakfast meetings, to 6:30, 7 p.m. dinner meetings, client meetings, networking events, your day does stretch out. So you need to sort of leave the idea of 9 to 5 behind.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's exciting to be doing things that way too. You did mention networking, and obviously, if you are going to be starting your own business, it's really, really important to, number one, if it's something new that's not one of these side hustle things, you better research what you're going to be doing, what's the feasibility of that, what's the market for that, and really do a lot of research on that. And once you decide on something that you want to do, you have to come up with business development strategies, of which relationships, aka networking, is a huge part, not only for business development but also for fulfillment. Because if you're going to be doing things and you can't handle everything yourself, which most people can't do, you need to develop partnerships with other people out there that can. And that allows each and every one of the entrepreneurs that are involved with this to go out and market themselves as being project managers to get a whole lot of stuff done, because they have these relationships with other people that they can rely on. So structuring those strategic partnerships are very, very important. Coming up with your business development strategies to make sure that your incoming work is going to be sufficient is really, really important too. And it's also a whole lot of fun, because you are going to develop new relationships out there, and you're going to make a whole lot of good friends through doing this thing that you never even dreamed of. I mean, when I was forced out of corporate, when we sold the business and got the boot, I was the wallflower at networking meetings, and now here I am running them, facilitating them, having an absolute ball. And I have so many friends I never would have even dreamed of, including you, if I hadn't gotten into this in the first place. So,
and when you're putting these plans together, you need to do these plans for whatever your business is, even if it is a side hustle like Uber. Because if you take a look at an Uber driver, they're not making their money sitting in their house. They're in the car. When somebody calls for an Uber, it's automatically routed to whatever Uber driver is closer. So you need to research, well, what areas around you have the most traffic, have the most requests, because you want to be in those areas. So it's not a matter of, flipping a switch and going, oh, yes, somebody's going to call me. You have to be out there where the business is. And that's a constant, whether you're running your own business, whether you're doing a side hustle, or even if you're still working at corporate, you need to be where the business is. And step one of that is figuring out where that is. And that means researching your market, identifying who your clients are, and really understanding the service that you are trying to offer.
yeah, and you have to put the pen to paper. And if you don't have an accounting background yourself, you're going to have to sit down with somebody that can actually look at this with you, because obviously you can take a look and see what you're going to be able to sell your services for, but you also have to outline the business expenses that you have that you may not know off the top of your head. And it's really, really important to budget for that, because there are going to be expenses. I mean, a side hustle is not just putting money in the bank. There's costs associated with that too. And you got to understand those up front, and again, determine whether it's feasible for you to do things in the first place based upon what the numbers are telling you.
Yes, you absolutely have to understand what your costs are. I was talking to a wannabe business owner. What he wanted to do is pretty much on the side get pop figures. And you've probably seen these in toy stores, and they're all over the place. They're little tchotchke figures that sit on a desk or sit on a shelf, but they're a big thing. And he had a wholesaler that he could buy from, and he was going to shows to sell them at these pop culture expos and comic book conventions and things like that. Well, he was looking